All right, guys. So what we're going to be doing today is looking specifically at the civil rights movement. And the civil rights movement has really been going on all throughout the United States history. So what we're going to do first is kind of look at the origins of this movement, look at the origins of slavery in the United States, and then kind of go from there. Most of these events the later are going to happen kind of during the Cold War. JFK was a very big kind of advocate for the civil rights movement and for people who were African American. So upon his assassination, we're going to kind of look at some of the major events that happened after that. So I'm just going to kind of go through, like I said, some of the origins of the Cold War. The origins of the civil rights movement. So the first kind of major milestone in slavery in the United States is in 1619. We see the first African slaves arrive in the colony of Jamestown. Then in 1776, so when the Declaration of Independence is signed, we have the 13 colonies unite together, and they're declaring that all men are created equal. However, they still continue to practice slavery after the war. Then in 1787, we see the Northwest Ordinance, which outlawed slavery in the new Midwestern states. Okay, in 1865, the Civil War ended, and we see slavery is outlawed after the passage of the 13th Amendment. In 1870, we see the 15th Amendment that guarantees black male voting rights. However, many of these rights are suppressed through literacy tests, poll taxes, and intimidation. Now, also in the 1870s, we see the passing of the Jim Crow laws, which separated blacks and whites in public places. This was declared legal in 1896 in the Plessy versus Ferguson case, and it said blacks and whites could be treated separate but equal. And we touched a little bit on this when we got into our Reconstruction unit as well. So some of this is going to be a review. Then we see Booker T. Washington makes the Atlanta Compromise with Southern white leaders. Blacks would submit to white political rule in exchange for access to basic education and due process. Okay, then we see Du Bois criticize the Atlanta Compromise and wanted more activism from the black community. Okay, so he organized an Niagara movement in opposition in 1905. Okay, then in 1909, Du Bois founded the NAACP, which is the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People, to oppose racial segregation and discrimination. Then in 1925, we see A. Philip Randolph organize the first predominantly African American labor union, which is called the Brotherhood of the Sleeping Car Porters, to represent African American interests. Then in 1941, Randolph organized a march on Washington to end discrimination in the defense industry. FDR avoided the march by banning the practice with the Executive Order 8802. Then in 1942, we had the Congress of Radical Equality. So CORE was founded to bring about equality for all people regardless of race. Then in 1948, Randolph pushed further to convince President Truman to desegregate the military with Executive Order 9981. So that is during World War II. Okay, in the 1950s, the NAACP focused their efforts on school desegregation. So I'll give you a minute to kind of look at this quick right. You can go ahead and pause the presentation if you want to go ahead and fill that in. Then we get the Brown versus Board of Education. This was led by prominent NAACP lawyer Thurgood Marshall, who engaged in and won numerous legal battles over school segregation. So we'll kind of look at some of the backstory behind Brown versus Board of Education. This work culminated in the 1954 case. Okay, and we will kind of look at this. So here's a picture of Linda Brown. She was a 9-year-old girl from Topeka, Kansas, who was required to walk much further to a black school, despite an all-white school being much closer. Okay, we'll kind of look at the distance. She was 4 blocks from a white school and 21 blocks from the black school she attended. The black school was not only 5 times further away, but it required Linda to travel through dangerous rail yard and bad neighborhoods. The Brown family sued in the court, and the Supreme Court agreed that Linda Brown should attend the all-white school. Okay, this declared that separate but equal was something that was unconstitutional. Okay, and it overturned the Plessy versus Ferguson case. It said when people are separated, one side will always be favored. Therefore, school segregation is legal. Okay, we're going to look at the Supreme Court justices that were in this Brown versus Board of Education case, and their decision was unanimous. It was 9-0. Okay, like I said earlier, this overturned the earlier Plessy versus Ferguson ruling, but enforce the ruling would be difficult as many states in the Deep South would openly ignore the decision and continue school segregation. Okay, Alabama is going to be kind of one of the most vigilant to stop desegregation. Okay, Governor George Wallace, he said segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever. Okay, we're going to look at Emmett Till. He was a 14-year-old boy from Chicago who was visiting relatives in Mississippi in the summer of 1955. He supposedly whistled at a white woman in a grocery store. Okay, the woman's husband tracked down Emmett and tortured him to death. He was severely beaten. His eyes were gouged out. He was shot in the head. He was tied to a 75-pound cotton gin fan with barbed wire and dumped into the river. And so there is a graphic image coming, but that is his parents with him. Emmett's mother insisted he have an open casket so the world could see what happened to her son. The main suspects were acquitted by an all-white jury in just an hour, of the case being tried. And the treatment of Emmett Till cast spotlight on the injustice of the Southern legal system. Okay, this provides a catalyst to the civil rights movement. Then we get in Montgomery, Alabama. Okay, on March 2nd, 1955, a 15-year-old, Claudette Colvin, refused to give up her bus seat to a white woman on a crowded, segregated bus. Colvin was handcuffed, arrested, and removed from the bus. She was charged with disturbing the peace and violating segregation laws. Eventually, the charges were dropped. Okay, 9 months later, on December 1st, Rosa Parks and 4 others were asked to vacate her seat in the black section to provide for white passengers. Okay, and she refused. She was arrested and fined $10. Okay, said she thought about moving seats, but then thought of Emmett Till and just couldn't do it. Okay, immediately after, the local NAACP chapter organized a boycott of the bus system, which was financially supported by the Black community. Martin Luther King Jr. was asked to lead the Montgomery Improvement Association to end segregation in Montgomery, Alabama. His home was firebombed as a result of his work. The boycott lasted 381 days, and it ended with a court ruling that bus segregation was unconstitutional. On December 21st, 1956, Montgomery buses were integrated. This inspired larger changes to bus policies. In the 1960 Boynton versus Virginia, this outlawed bus segregation across state lines as it disrupted interstate commerce, and the federal government had the authority to regulate it. And you can take a quick write on who was Emmett Till, Claudette Colvin, and Rosa Parks, and how they inspired the civil rights movement. All right, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. This was created on February 14th, 1957 by Martin Luther King Jr., Charles Steele, and Fred Shuttlesworth. King was the organization's first president. The SCLC was a major force in organizing the civil rights movement and focused on nonviolence and civil disobedience. King was adamant that the movement not sink to the level of their opposition. He said, "We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline." Then in the story of the Little Rock Nine. So in the fall of 1957, 9 Black students were to be integrated into the all-white Little Rock Central High School in Arkansas. Following the court ruling in the Brown versus Board of Education that school segregation was illegal, protests take over the school grounds in Arkansas. Governor Orville Fabulous calls in the National Guard to prevent students from entering. U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower overrules and calls in the 101st Airborne to escort and protect students throughout the day. School year goes on without major incidents thanks to the military presence, but by 1959, all schools in Arkansas desegregated. In New Orleans, kindergartner Ruby Bridges and 6 other Black children passed a strenuous entrance exam designed to keep her out. She was escorted to school each day by 4 federal marshals. She was taught alone by Barbara Henry for the entire school year as white families refused to let their children attend. Family suffered terrible as Ruby's father lost his job and the local grocery barred the family from entering. This inspired many whites and Blacks that integration was the only path forward. Then we get in the Greensboro sit-in, of North Carolina. So 4 college students from North Carolina's A&T arranged a sit-in at Woolworth's Five and Dime store on February 1st, 1960. You can go into this location. They've kind of turned it into a mini museum. But they planned to sit at the whites-only counter and refused to leave until they received service. And here are the 4 individuals who were participated in the Greensboro sit-in. They contacted a local news reporter to ensure the event is captured by the media. On the first day, they were heckled and taunted, but refused to leave. On the second day, 20 others joined them. On the third day, over 60. And on the fourth day, over 300 people were there. This inspired sit-ins in other nearby cities, and by July, the store agreed to desegregate. The attention had negatively hurt their business and agreed to make the change. Then we get in the Freedom Riders. CORE organized a mass effort to protest interstate bus segregation in May of 1961. The Supreme Court ruled in Boynton versus Virginia that it was illegal. However, many southern states were ignoring the ruling. Sent civil rights activists onto southern buses to purposefully violate segregation laws. This resorted to nonviolent resistance each time they were confronted. Here's some pictures. Always rode buses together, and one person would always obey the law in order to arrange legal help to get the arrest activists released. This faced mob violence all over, but most severe happened in Alabama, where a mob attacked the bus and slashed its tires. The mob followed the bus and firebombed it when it had to stop. Mob held the door shut, intended to burn the riders to death. Luckily, an undercover officer drew a weapon and forced the doors open. The original group had 13 members, but it had grown to 450 as they garnered support. And the success of the riders improved future movements to gain access to voting rights, school desegregation, and ending discrimination. Actions pushed Attorney General Robert Kennedy to demand the Interstate Commerce Commission and racial segregation on buses.